Welcome to College Recruiter, where we believe that every student and recent grad deserves a great career. I am Anna Peters, and today I am excited to be joined by Kelly Renz. We are going to be talking about succession planning as it particularly relates to developing entry-level talent. Kelly is CEO of the Novo group, where they believe better people means better business. And Kelly also claims to be a non-conformist when it comes to business practices. So I'm particularly excited to hear what she has to say about developing entry-level talent, perhaps some things I haven't heard yet. I will say Kelly is going to be a speaker at SHRM's 2018 conference, and her presentation is titled Demystifying Succession Planning. It's easier than you think.
Yes.
So anybody out there who is attending the conference in June should check her out. Thanks for joining us, Kelly.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be with you today.
Yeah. So let's talk let's get into it. So we typically see employees get promoted because they're vocal, they're assertive, they build the right relationships, they know how to open doors. But these employees are not always, or not necessarily, the best leaders, right? So how can managers who are hearing from their teams, oh, pick me, how do they choose or how do they avoid falling into that pattern?
It's not very different from the pattern of selection either. We tend to hire the people who are the best interviewees as well. That doesn't always mean they're the best candidates for the job. So it's not much different for succession planning either.
Easy trap.
So we see this pattern, with managers over time. In organizations that don't have a formal succession planning program or talent identification program, that can be a real challenge for the entry-level groups. So, one of the things that individuals can do to help be more of a self-advocate is to, if they're not comfortable in those group settings or team settings, raising their hand and trying to self-advocate group-wise, it's important to schedule career development discussions with a manager. A lot of the gaps that we see happen at that point of the career is that somebody hasn't actually had a conversation. Really that simple is the first step. And scheduling that time proactively with a manager, maybe not waiting until they reach out. Sometimes performance evaluation cycles are great. A lot of companies are getting away from those traditional cycles. So I recommend that an individual takes control of their own destiny on that. Schedule a career development discussion. Make it known, make it aware to a manager of what the interest level is. Ask for development opportunities. Privately, that's a little bit safer feeling. It's proactive, it shows initiative without being the louder, upfront individual. So individuals still need to drive some of that on their own.
So the trend is away from the annual performance review and waiting 1 year to find out whether your team is performing or whether as an individual you've done a good job. For managers, to speak to managers and the HR leader and particularly TA leaders, do you find that the more constant, more ongoing feedback is helpful and conducive to identifying really good leaders, not just the vocal ones?
Right. I think it is. I think that, talent development doesn't have a cycle per se. It should be an ongoing, living, breathing thing. And, still on the individual's shoulders to help drive some of their own individual development. Let's say, 6 months into a typical year, somebody wants to have that discussion, then schedule the meeting, have that opportunity. Seek that out. That proactivity goes miles. It can feel scary. It can be feel like taking a risk, but I'll say that it probably pays off more often than it doesn't to be able to, raise your hand and say, I'd really like to have a discussion about opportunities. That's a really good proactive thing to do. And I don't think that has to wait for any special cycle. I think people need to do that when they feel the need to have that discussion and come prepared to be able to talk about what opportunities they're interested in, as well as be prepared to get the feedback needed to develop that next level. When we ask the question of what do I need to do to get to that next level, also have to be ready for the information that we get back, right?
True. Okay, so here's a question for you. So from the manager's point of view, when a team member comes and asks for feedback or they want to schedule that sit down, especially in light of the equal pay news and everything gaining momentum in that area, do you advise managers to kind of take a pause and say, well, this person wants wants development. They want feedback. They want to grow. Should I also then schedule meetings with everyone else?
Yep, I think that's a really fair question. The best managers out there will have a natural inclination and desire to connect with their employees regularly anyway on talent development, to give those opportunities, to open that door, to make it welcome. Absolutely, that should be happening. We know in reality the ideal environment doesn't always happen for every organization. Managers are busy. Candidly, some of these talent initiatives are the ones that get pushed to the bottom of the list of to-dos when they really should be at the top, because these are the ways that other things will get done and people will grow. So managers should use that as a signal. If they haven't had those discussions with others, that's really a good catalyst to say, I have other team members that we should be having this discussion. And not waiting for human resources or human capital to drive those processes. Managers should take that initiative on a regular basis to check in with their employees, and multiple times a year, not just on an annual basis. Sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah.
So on that note, what are some indicators that you tell managers to be watchful of that would show leadership potential in an entry-level employee? So somebody who really doesn't have a lot of experience. What are some of those indicators of leadership?
So there's a few things that managers look for, and of course it's a little bit different by industry, but there's some aptitude or some capability things you look for. One is you do look for the individual who may initiate additional responsibility, but those are the individuals who are also getting quote unquote their day job done, right? But these are people who are looking to fill gaps in the organization. They identify something, they have ideas, they share insights. I mean, that is that vocal employee that may share observations of ways to make things better. That's a good indicator that somebody is engaged, they care, they want to see something done better. It doesn't mean it has to always be the best idea. There's probably one good idea out of 20, right? But at the end of the day, managers do need to watch for those innovations versus seeing it as rocking the boat. I think that should be welcome somebody into the boat and say, let's stand up and talk about it. For the quieter employee, we talk about introverts, right? There's the extroverted introverts, there's introverts, and we talk about those, to your earlier question, that may not vocalize their ideas. Managers should look for ways to invite that in different conversations, make it a safe environment, comfortable, for brainstorming, to invite ideas. Those quiet individuals will step forward if they have those ideas, or invite different ways to get innovation concepts shared. So that's one thing, is you're looking for the employee who wants a continuous improvement mindset. Another is somebody who tends to go above and beyond, watch for the satisfaction of clients, watch for the feedback from other team members. We all know there's some individuals who just knock it out of the park, and we can recognize that. Solicit feedback from their stakeholders. At the Novo group, about half of our employees are millennials. And it's a high feedback culture here. We have very real-time feedback. We don't do annual performance reviews. We do per engagement reviews. And in there, we're asking for 360 feedback. That's another way to do it, is sometimes the quietest minds are the best minds for the opportunity. Managers need to help seek out some of that feedback from their stakeholders.
And I think two of your points actually seem related to me, as when you were talking about introverts and the need for managers to really seek out their insight and a more comfortable space, maybe smaller space with fewer people around them. And then asking for customer feedback. Perhaps the people who are quieter and more introverted are doing just excellent job in focusing on the client, not themselves, in advocating themselves externally, but focusing on the client, which is great. Exactly what you want.
Right. Exactly.
Can you tell or speak to the difference between, when we're talking about succession planning? We think of creating that pipeline up to the top. Right. So can you speak to how businesses might balance the difference between focusing on the positions, leadership positions, and then what, the B position that feeds into the A position, right, as opposed to focusing on the people, who are your top people, and moving them up? So can you speak to the difference?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is stealing a little of the thunder from the SHRM event in June, but this will be a good preview.
That's feeding.
Exactly. When when you think about succession planning, there's a couple of things that typically happen. One is it either becomes an executive-only program, or it only goes down to a certain level of leadership in the business. And candidly, that's really missing the boat of what succession planning really should be achieving. So the way we discuss it, and it's really simple, is that there's ways to profile your organization. And I always say you don't need really expensive tools. You don't need to be a large organization to do this. If you have Excel, you have everything you need. And it's a matter of, say, inventorying certain positions in your company. And I'll get to how you select the talent then. The first thing is a business needs to identify what are considered key roles in the business. Key roles should really fuel the focus for succession planning. So key roles can be executives, of course, but we define those as roles that, if vacated or when vacated, could cause a significant business disruption or pain, or could be something that hampers a client relationship. Great examples of non-executive roles. Think about it from a sales perspective. It could be a key account sales individual who owns the relationship to the largest client of the company. What happens if they leave tomorrow? What happens to that risk? It could be your data scientist who keeps really to himself or herself and owns the methodology and the mind space for a formula that was created. Even if it's documented, it's never quite fully. Key roles should be defined in an organization. There's no magic formula of what percentage of your positions should be key roles. It should be unique to each company. Then the other item that you do is you profile, we talk about it as an acceleration pool. We don't really talk about high potentials. When we talk about high potentials, employees tend to think that there's low potentials then in the organization. I think culturally that's one of those things vernacular-wise we can change. But if you look at your acceleration pool of individuals who show early promise, and you've got this map of these key roles, that's when you can start creating an organizational succession plan to say, okay, we've got these 50 key roles. We've got these 100, awesome individuals for talent. Now, what are the gaps in skill set, knowledge, and ability that we need to fill? And we can start, developing competencies. That's where really good leadership development programs come into play. They should match key roles. But it's not rocket science, but it's a good place to start.
Easier said than done. What I love is that I'm a very visual person. I love the integration of those two maps. You have your key roles and you have your early promise, people with early promise. That would be, I would love to see that.
Yes. And it's not as hard to do as it may sound.
Oh, good. Well, you'll get into that, I'm sure, in your presentation. Let's talk a little bit about gender diversity or diversity in general. So again, in light of succession planning, to avoid filling that pipeline up to the top senior leadership with more white males, how do you advise organizations to develop entry-level women, entry-level people of color?
So, you're seeing in organizations a lot more of diversity and inclusion, D&I initiatives, which have broadened the definition of diversity, right? It's not female, it's not just ethnicity, it is sexual orientation, it's everything, fits into that. And companies who are developing more of the affinity programs, as they tend to be called, these deliberate sessions and places for the like-minded to connect and champion their differences together in the organization and share those opportunities and make it far more accepting, are the companies that are going to see that feed into a succession plan. Diversity and inclusion does not happen by accident. It doesn't. And for too long, we've just said, oh, okay, well, we'll just see what happens. And we'll just make our recruiters responsible for it and fill the pipeline.
Ah, yes.
It starts at a track.
And then we're supposed to get increased profits when we get diversity in the door.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a very disconnected clinical approach we've been taking. But organizations, the smallest organizations, can create a forum in which these are groups that can be educated on opportunities. They can have a chance to connect. That's the biggest part, is people don't realize that there's a lack of connection. And then provide those opportunities and make diversity part of executive goals and accountabilities. Honestly, if you just about anything you tie to compensation, you can incent, right? There's elements of diversity that you can get into your succession planning if you make it a formal part of the process.
Yeah. If it is treat it as a business initiative, just like any other business initiative. And
one that has maybe just a little bit extra attention given all of the focus. I think it needs to be very purposeful. It has to have a tie to some sort of a strategic initiative.
Definitely. Oh, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Back to, I want to ask you about the idea that employees more and more are less loyal to their employers for good or for bad. And that, I would say the flip side too. Employers are less loyal to their employees.
Very true.
So in that, how do you advise your clients to succession plan when the tenure has dramatically reduced? So is it even worth it, basically?
Yeah, trust me, very fair question. So I always talk, it's interesting when the loyalty piece comes up or the high turnover. So while yes, statistics show that the workforce is staying put less time, I really think that a lot of that's still reflective that if you keep somebody challenged and you keep somebody moving through their career and they're enjoying where they are and they're tied to your purpose, they still won't leave. People still leave for a lot of different reasons, right? Bad managers, not feeling connected to the organization. Most people don't leave for no reason. So organizations still need to inspect and really evaluate why is there turnover. The quickest answer is to say, that's just the generations now, right? That's really missing the boat.
Kind of a cop-out.
Right. People will stay in an organization where they feel challenged, connected, and valued, and that they believe in the mission. That's really what it's, purpose is far more important now than it was 20 years ago for employee engagement.
Especially entry level. Gen Z coming in?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I've got one of those in my family, one of my kids. I know what it's going to take to keep them engaged. It's
impact.
Tough, but it can be done. But I do think that succession planning is worth it. And here's why. If you do identify that talent earlier in their career and you do put them on a development plan and they can see on the horizon what they're working towards, that is one of the number one reasons people leave a company is they don't see their path. Mm-hmm. Give them the path, give them the tools, give them the development, expect them to engage and do their part. You at least have a better than fighting chance of retention. And you're creating a cultural expectation that, we are going to make this investment. Now, there will be turnover, maybe more than there was, 15, 20 years ago. That's just going to have to be part of it. And in succession planning, there is also a recruiting element, right? So we know that not every key role, as we talk about it, will get filled internally. Mm-hmm. Part of it should be a recruiting strategy as well. So when we talk about succession planning with our clients, it's not just who do you have in-house, but who would you need to go get in addition to what you have in-house.
Well, and that goes back to the two integrated maps.
Exactly.
Where are the gaps between the key roles and people?
It's definitely worth it. It just has to be progressive and ongoing.
Yeah, great. Kelly, is there anything else you would like to say regarding entry-level development and succession planning that I didn't ask you about?
I'll just give you a parting thought, and that's that as you look at, if you're sitting in the seat as an employee, really self-development and self-advocacy is key today. Don't assume that everybody knows what you're capable of. Take the time to reach out to managers, sit down, voice your opportunity, voice your interest. Privately or in a group setting, don't be afraid to ask. What's the worst that somebody could say? So we really encourage people, right, to take control of their own destiny from a development perspective and make themselves known. Yeah. That's how to get into the succession planning process.
Great. Good words of wisdom.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Okay, you have a great day. Thank you for having me.